Hi, my name is Vernon Oickle. I'm an author and newspaper editor based in Nova Scotia, Canada.
Hi,
and
Vernon.
Hi.
Hi, I'm Nina Munteanu, and I'm an author and a teacher.
And very versed in helping budding authors get themselves prepared for writing.
You got it.
And published, right? Because
Exactly.
writing a book is only one part of the process.
That's right.
Getting it published
is the big part.
Yeah.
You got that.
And oftentimes the most challenging, because everybody has ideas and everybody wants to be a writer and everybody can be a writer.
And everybody is a writer.
Exactly.
But
everybody has a story to tell, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Not everybody knows how to do that and has, in fact, the persistence to do
Exactly.
that, to get it to the point where it's going to be published.
Right.
So we're going to help you here.
Persistence, that's key. That's
key.
because all of anyone who's been, I don't care how successful you are, Stephen King to whoever, it all starts with writing and then getting rejected.
Yeah.
And then getting published, right?
And then getting published. And then getting rejected again.
That's right.
Exactly.
Yeah, so
I have a workshop that I give. It's called the Writer's Toolkit. And speaking of persistence, in the very beginning I talk about my 5 P's of getting published.
Ah.
The last P is publishing, obviously.
Yes.
It starts with a P, last I heard. There are other P's involved. And the first one is passion.
Passion.
Without passion to carry you all the way to publishing, it's going to be a tough road. It is a tough road, isn't it?
It certainly is, yeah.
It's a great road.
Yeah.
I mean, anything that's worth doing is
question.
Going to have its
passion. If you feel you have a story worth telling, and you've taken the time to write it down, and you still feel strongly about it, then you've got to, and you know it deserves to be out there.
Yeah.
That's the passion.
That's it. Tapping into your passion is tapping into that energy, that fuel inside you that is going to let you ride out all the ups and downs of the whole ride. And it is a journey. It is a ride. It's a roller coaster ride. But it's a thrilling one. It's a wonderful one, isn't it? I mean, you've published all kinds of stuff.
I have.
From ghost stories to
a novel,
books on angels, and to an awesome novel that you're working on right now. And every single one is different too, isn't it?
Indeed.
Every single project is different.
Yes.
It has its challenges.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, and you touched on it before, that even successful or established authors or published writers don't necessarily have it easier than people who are just starting, right? I mean, it's still a process regardless.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, exactly.
Let's talk about some of the issues and challenges that writers have in getting their work on paper and out there. So, as an established writer and giving advice to those who are just breaking in, Nina, what resources or what tools would you recommend to a budding author?
You mean besides a computer?
Yeah.
A laptop?
Yeah.
Pen and ink? Some people still do that.
Yes.
They write notes because it takes a different side of the brain, right?
Indeed.
In fact, I bring a notebook with me.
Everywhere.
Wherever I go.
Yeah. I always have a piece of paper, even when I'm driving.
Of course, the corollary to that is I always lose it. But it's in my head, right? Somehow getting it down on paper helps. There are 2 elements to writing, as you well know. There's to a career in writing as an author. There's the writing part, the creative endeavor, if you will, sitting down at that place that you write and creating your story. You do that basically in isolation. And a lot of people need quiet. Some people don't need quiet, but in their mind they do. There are things that you need to do that, and things that you need to give yourself. And I call them sacred time and sacred space. That's time when you write, and every successful writer usually says that they have to discipline themselves to do so, to write every day a certain amount or a certain time period. So you give that to yourself. We live very, very busy days, busy lives, doing all kinds of things, and particularly as a beginner, if you're just writing, it's not a career yet, right? It's a dream. The tendency is to say, well, I'll do that when everything else gets done. And this is why people want to write, but many people never get to the point where they're doing it. So giving yourself a time and a place that is dedicated to writing is key. So that's a resource.
Indeed.
That's something that you give to yourself. The other part of the writing, successful writing, is getting it out there. It's not enough to write, right?
You can write as much as you want, but if you don't get it out there,
then you don't get it out there. You don't get it published. So the getting of it published involves getting out there, doing the research, doing the editing, and meeting people and marketing and promoting. And that involves using other kinds of resources, and that's anything from the local community, local writers like yourself and myself, people who teach, people simply who write, who are willing to speak with you, to online communities and online services, and going further out. So that's sort of that would be my short answer.
And talking about time, I get this question a lot because I mean I do have book projects, and I'm a newspaper editor, and I write for the newspaper, and I have a home to take care of, and I have a family, and you know, and I do volunteer work in the community, and I'm often asked, how do you find the time to write a book or to work on a book project? And my quick answer is, you just do it. If you really want to do it seriously as a career, or even to supplement your career, or because you just love to write, you just somehow you juggle things around and you find the time to do it.
Yeah, you do. The hard reality is most writers are not full-time writers.
Right.
They're not Stephen King. That's a small, percentage of the entire writing population. And I'm saying authors who are published. For the most part, most authors who are published are doing it in addition to other things that they are doing. Like they may have 2 other careers on top of that to make a living. So most writers are dealing with that all the time. And the way they do that, like I said, is to give themselves that sacred time and sacred space. And basically, what makes that successful and what makes that happen is to advertise it to other people. I know other people are saying, just do it. Don't tell anybody. That way you'll get it done. I'm of the opposite opinion, where if you tell people, you are basically establishing respect, and they're on side with what you're doing, and then you will get it done. And it establishes a routine of doing it. So it snowballs.
I think in my case it was like, I have a story to tell and it just needs to come out. So you just find the time. You know, it could be early evening or late evening. It could be early morning at 4 o'clock. You know, it could be wherever, but you just find it.
And you make it. It's not finding. It's making.
Making it, exactly. Because you can always find reasons why you can't do it. Right? Could be something great on television that you want to watch.
Exactly.
Now
you can always tape it.
Exactly. Now you touched on finding resources and reaching out to other people, Nina. Particularly for people who are just getting started in the business, do you recommend that they find classes to attend or seminars, that sort of thing?
Again, along the lines of resources, right? Classes are good. Especially when you're a beginner. It's not so much even learning the tricks of the trade or what's the word I'm looking for? Techniques. But in some cases, it's finding your community. It's finding your support network.
Right.
There are classes everywhere. You can go from the local, the regional, way out to world-class stuff. And, for instance, I mentioned before about Writer's Digest giving courses, in Maui and Europe, and there's all kinds of places where you can go to a writer's retreat and enjoy Tuscany or something like that.
Who wouldn't want to do that?
All right, well, I'll be doing that next year. I'll be giving them next year.
Put me in your 60s.
In fact, I do give them. But starting with your local community does a number of things. First of all, it's much easier to do so. You don't have to pay a lot of money to go somewhere else.
Indeed.
You're right in your own community. Secondly, you're getting to know your writing community, which is important because they're a real resource. And also they may be more relevant because they are in your part of the world. So yes, writing classes are a good idea. Not so much, it doesn't have to be a formal class, although a lot of good writers are also good teachers and will give classes. My background is in teaching. I was teaching for 25 years alongside my writing, so I come at it honestly.
Right.
But a lot of writers aren't necessarily teachers. However, they can still give you a lot of good information through things like conventions. If you go to writers' conferences or conventions, you can meet the coolest people,
Indeed.
all the people that you read, for instance, and ask them anything. They are accessible. They're real people, right? The first convention I went to ever, I met Robert J. Sawyer, established science fiction writer.
Excellent.
Many, many books behind him. And what does he do? He's talking to me. And he's making suggestions on finding agents. He's making suggestions on writing. He's there. And he's the best. So find those venues.
Yes.
Find those venues and make use of them.
Yes.
They're there for that purpose.
And oftentimes, I know locally here in our community that the local libraries do a great job in organizing seminars and courses, and they bring in guest authors.
Yeah,
and,
exactly.
And,
who do readings, anything from
absolutely.
readings
Yeah,
to workshops.
Workshops, yeah.
Which
you've done.
Yeah.
You've done
And that's a good point. So, and your community's pretty good for that.
Yes.
So that's
Always check around, because networking is as Nina says, if you're serious about being published, it'll certainly be vital to your career.
Exactly.
to have contacts in the industry, because it is an industry.
It is an industry, and it's the networking part isn't just oh, I know so and so, therefore I'm going to get published. That sort of thing.
That doesn't work.
It doesn't work that way. The idea behind networking is to get to know how the industry works.
Yeah, exactly.
Because when you're new to it, you can do a lot of clumsy things.
Yes.
And they'll recognize that right away. So by networking, you get to know the industry, and you in turn are more respected, right? I mean,
it's very intimidating.
Yeah.
You can have a great collection of short stories or a novel or a nonfiction book, and it could be something original that no one's ever done before. But you can also lose that book by not going the proper routes.
Very good point. Very good point. So that's the other aspect. Like there's the first, like we were saying before, the resources. There's the writing part. Write something original, definitely. Do a good job of writing. Make sure that you've done something fantastic. You got to be proud of that.
Absolutely.
Have a passion behind it.
Passion.
But the other part is important too, and nowadays particularly, the writer has to get out there and talk to people, get to know their community, get to know how the business is going. And it is a business, like you mentioned. It's definitely a business. And it's in your interest to know how it works.
Yeah, and contrary to what you may have heard in the past, particularly as a child, in this business you have to self-promote, right? Because we've been told, well, don't brag about yourself, or that type of thing. But as an author and as somebody who wants to be published in the future, you need to talk yourself up.
I was at a big writers conference not too long ago, and even the big publishing companies are pushing their authors to do stuff. Anywhere from blogging to YouTubing and whatnot. And again, to bring Robert J. Sawyer back into the picture, he's an excellent example of somebody who did that long before most authors were doing it. He just went straight into self-promotion. And his career has paid off in spades because of that. Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with it. It's funny, we're Canadian here. And in Canada, we're polite. We are. We can still promote and be polite. There's nothing wrong with that. Yeah. It's we just do it a little differently. Yeah. But you do need to promote.
Absolutely. Because if you don't believe in yourself, you can't expect a publisher to believe in you.
Yeah. There's an excitement that comes with that.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be bragging, although someone else might think it is. But if you're not excited about your work, it's not going to translate into anyone else's excitement.
That's right.
That's
You can't expect an agent or a publisher to say this is great when you can't say that about yourself or about your work.
Yeah.
So that's getting published, but let's get the story written first, right?
Okay. Good idea. Good idea. That's rule number one.
Yeah,
Finish your work.
So you might have all these ideas. If you're like me, have all these ideas bouncing around in your head. And on my laptop, I have a folder called Story Ideas or Potential Ideas, and it's like longer than my arm probably, but to sit down and write it. How do I do that? How do you balance? For example, one of the questions that I think you probably get asked a lot, and I do, although my books are more. My books are nonfiction, and I do have some fiction behind me. But how do you balance when you're writing a book? How do you balance between this is the plot and this is the character or characters I'm going to bring into the story? How do you do that?
Wow, good question. And by the way, I think nonfiction has plot and character too.
It does.
In fact, the best nonfiction reads like fiction.
You're absolutely correct. I absolutely
It has all
would
the same kind of elements to it. It's got that hook, what's going on, intrigue, and there are characters involved, and there's a storyline.
Because you don't want it to be, even though it's stagnant and stale, right? It's
even a scientific paper.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, it does. It does. It really does. But to go back to plot character, really that's an artificial way of teasing apart story. Everything is story. Story is king, right?
Absolutely.
It's more a question of not so much balancing those two as how they fit together and how they're glued together. And they're glued together through theme. Plot essentially is simply what happens to the characters. And the characters in turn affect the plot, like how they react, how they interact. I mean, that is plot as well. So everything that happens in the story, all the bad things, which is usually the case, that creates attention for the characters, is plot. But plot needs to be directed and driven, and that's where theme comes in.
Right.
Either the overarching theme of the entire story down to the personal issues of the character, which are usually linked in to the larger theme. It's like almost a fractal type of relationships in theme. You can have subplots and all that kind of stuff. They're all related to theme. So theme is the driver that drives the plot that affects the characters. Right. And it comes back to the character in turn has to reflect the theme. So they're all interlinked,
right,
like a rope.
Right. Of course, and you want them to be weaved seamlessly throughout the story. You don't want somebody to say this is the theme. You want to show it.
Although you know what, it's important when they're not writing that they are able to step out and say just that. This is the theme of the story. If you don't know the theme, then there are other elements that you're probably going to be struggling with. So it is at some point important to be able to dissect it out, so that you can then write seamlessly.
So then, how do I start, Nina? I've got this great idea for a story that I think is probably the
You plug
next.
your computer in. That's how you
Indeed.
start.
Okay, we've done that, but I have this great story. It's going to be the next best international seller. They're going to make a movie, and
oh, cool.
They're going to have.
Can I be in it?
Sure. You can name the actress to play.
Okay.
But do you suggest or recommend that authors start off with an outline and sort of storyboard the story, or do you just kind of sit down and go at it?
You know what? I'm going to say definitely outline.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny because a couple of years ago I would have said no. I would have said no, don't interfere with the creative process. Outlines are for people who are for mystery writers. Outlines are great. In fact, even if you don't think you're outlining, you should be outlining. If it's not on paper, it should be up here. Outlines, having said that, they don't have to be tight outlines like this happened, like outline basically is the plot, is what happens to every person, everything, and all that kind of stuff. What I'm talking about is at the very least a loose outline. having, what an outline does is it helps the mind organize itself in terms of the story.
Mm-hmm.
It's like storyboarding.
Mm-hmm.
Storyboarding is an important thing to do, because if you don't have a sense of what is going on, and this comes back to theme, if you don't have a sense of what the story is about, the so what of the story, then you are simply floundering.
Mm-hmm.
Your characters don't have a connection to the theme, the plot doesn't have a connection to the theme, your ending may never end. Do you have that problem? Your beginning might not begin at the right spot. All these things relate to the story, and in order to know that, it helps to outline.
Right.
So outlining can save you years when you're working on that first novel, the one that's never ending, the one that's in your drawer there. And not only that, at the end, the outline can then be used to sell your book.
Right.
So
Do you also recommend, in terms of outlining, or at least having an idea of the story, how it's going to progress, that before you even start to put it down, that you should know where your characters are starting and where they're going to end up?
It helps. I know some authors say, I don't want to know what happens. I want my characters to take me there. It's like getting seamlessly into that whole story, fictive dream. That's fine if you have a luxury of writing for many years for a book.
Right.
But if you want to be efficient, then you do that ahead of time or during the early stages of the book.
Right.
And that makes it more efficient. If you know the end, then that will be reflected throughout the story, from the beginning through
Right.
the middle. It just makes it that much easier to do.
Okay. So, Nina, now that I've got this great story and I know the characters and I've got a basic idea of how the plot is going to proceed and where my character should ultimately end up, how do I decide, how do I know which point of view I want to write the story from?
Good question. I bet you've had
I've
issues,
done it,
right?
Yeah, I have.
Well, first of all, there's different point of views. There's the I, there's the me, right? I'm telling a story. Then there's limited third person, he, she sort of thing. Then there's omniscient, which is what Dickens and a lot of the classics do. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times, and basically you're God talking to the audience. And there's something called second person. You went down the street, you did this, you did that. There's usually conversation. It is used in books, but it's bizarre. People don't use it too much. There are advantages and disadvantages to all of them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I know that I started one book in the third person. Third person limited is actually the most common, and it's there for a reason, because it allows you to enter one person's head at any given time and then go to someone else's head.
Right.
At any given. You can have as many point of views as you want. The tacit rule is that you stay in that person's head in that scene, at least, if not that entire chapter, which makes it easy for the reader. So you have chapter A based on George's point of view, and you have chapter B based on Susan's point of view. Susan loves George, George hates Susan, and you have two things going on there, right? It's really fun. You can do that. When you do an I story, a lot of detective stories are I, those through I, but maybe you can tell me why. But
I can't.
Oh, okay. It's
I
much
couldn't
more.
ask.
It's much more intimate.
Yes.
It's much more powerful, but it's also much more limiting because it's only that person's point of view.
Yeah.
And so, are they a reliable point of view? Are they kind of the whole world is based on them, their perception of the world. So that makes it both. That's both the disadvantages and advantages of it. But it's kind of a neat thing because I was just saying, I started one book in the limited third person, just the easiest one to do, and it just didn't have quite the zing. And I went to first person, and bang,
There it was.
Bang, it was totally different.
Yeah.
So point of view does have an effect on the kind of story that you're telling. So that's an important thing to keep in mind. But as I'm sure you,
It's a
like you
personal
just said
thing.
to me, it's It's a personal thing, and it's an intuitive thing,
Yeah.
and there is no hard, fast rule.
And I love to read. There's a series of detective books, and they're written. Initially, they were written as from the first person point of view, the character, and then after 10 books or so, the author switched to third person. And I found it was quite a. I still
Yeah.
love the books very much.
But it had a different feel to it.
Absolutely.
Didn't it? Totally different.
The first,
it's like you lost the person.
kind of, and it was quite
Stepped away from
jarring. From one book where it was
Yeah.
first person to the next book where it was third person. It was like I was reading a different approach, because
Yeah.
when I was reading from the first person, I felt I was getting to know that person
Yes.
in
Yeah. It's
her
much more
head.
intimate. Much more
Indeed.
intimate.
Yeah.
I read a book which was really cool. I can't remember what it was. Wish I could. Where it was, I think it was a fantasy, and this author, it was about some dragons and stuff. She went literally, each chapter flipped from first person, this person,
Mhm.
to the next one was third person, and
Okay.
then back and forth. So it actually flip-flopped in point of view. It worked.
I was going to ask you.
It really worked.
Really?
But it was always the same person who it was the first person
Right.
of. So, in other words, she chose to be very intimate with this one person and have just their point of view whenever they were there. And then when anyone else was around, it was everyone else's point of view. So
Interesting.
that works too. That you can play with it.
Yeah.
It's
To
kinda
be
cool.
creative, obviously. I mean, that's
Yep.
the whole process of
Yep.
being a writer.
I guess the key though there is to be consistent with the concept that you put through and be good to the reader, like you're not mixing them up.
Right. Right. Yeah, we won't like that too much.
No.
No.
Readers want it to be clear.
So Nina, if I'm writing a story about something that I know personally well, for example, in my case, if my character was a newspaper reporter or editor, how would I remain objective about that character or about the subject matter without allowing myself to let my personal feelings or views shine through? Because you want it to be real, right? If you want to reflect that life.
Well, I guess some of that is you're talking research here. If you've researched, if you're writing about someone who is not like you, someone that's quite different, then it's important to have researched that really well so that you can go into their skin and write about that and be consistent with it. But if you don't put yourself into it, then it's going to ring false, right? So that's my feeling is that it's a balance of objectivity and subjectivity. I think you always have to be in tune with that part of it. But where you bring in the objectivity and the consistency, I think is also what you're talking about, that's where research comes in. And sometimes what I do with some of my books, because they're huge, epic kind of fantasy type books with all kinds of incredible world building that I have to do.
Yeah.
I literally write out notes on the world, the people, the this, the
Right.
that. None of that appears in the book, but it stays with me, and
Right.
I use it,
Right.
and that helps the objectivity.
Right, right. Because we're often told, and as writers, to write about what we know.
Right.
So if you're writing about what you know, the tendency would be to become very personal about it. and-
Yeah. See that's a funny phrase, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
And I kind of go, what?
Because if you're a fiction writer, you don't have to write about
No,
something you know.
No, and it's because write what you know is you can take it literally or you can take it metaphorically. And truly, the way I see it is it's a metaphoric statement. It's essentially write what you feel,
Right.
because what you really feel inside you is what you know
Oh, right.
about the world, the universal truth, and you bring anything to bear on that.
Right.
I think that's really it, as opposed to just write about the topics that you know,
Yeah.
because you can research anything.
I was going to say
and
you
get
can,
into anything.
if it's a technical issue or a career or
Yeah,
a different
it's
country, you can find out about it.
That phrase is really not meant to be limiting as much as guiding you to be genuine, right from the heart is
Yes.
really what that comes down to.
Right.
And I mean, that's it, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, if you don't believe, if you don't believe in it,
That last book of yours, for instance, you're bringing your heart into a different topic. It's would you call that paranormal?
some of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, indeed.
But your characters are singing because you put in your heart into that, and that's really what it's about.
Yeah,
That's
that's the passion.
That's the passion.
That's what you know.
That's clicking,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So now I've got this great idea, and I've got a basic idea of where the story's going to go, what the character's going to do, and I'm going to have villains, and I'm going to have heroes, and
Hopefully.
or the story's going to be rather dull.
Oh,
isn't it?
I'll say. No one's going to read it.
I don't think you're going to want to read
You're
it.
not going to finish it.
So, from your perspective as a teacher and a writer, what makes a good villain and what makes a good hero?
Good question. Great question. Same thing. Don't you think? The hero, people don't see the villain that way necessarily, but if the villain did this, it would be really, really cool too. The hero changes the most, should change the most. The hero is your main character that is going to have the most drastic story arc. They're going to learn something or have some kind of epiphany, make a discovery, whatever, right? The hero goes into that dark place, comes out with a prize, the hero's journey sort of thing. Villains are similar. The villain is the hero's main antagonist. Ironically, if you think of all of your favorite stories with heroes and villains, the villains are very close to the hero. They have very similar characters. In order for the hero to be strong, they have to have very definite strengths and weaknesses that then play off each other through plot, right?
Yeah.
Plot challenges their weaknesses and pulls out their strengths, whether they realize it or not, that sort of stuff. Same thing with the villain. In fact, they're often very similar. It's just that the villain deals with them differently. And the different part is what challenges the hero's integrity, hero's strengths, and that sort of thing. So there's that. That's where the connection is. It's almost like a seamless marriage between these two. The best hero-villain things or stories are where you can almost see the same person in them, but it's just a different, they mirror each other.
And
That's
often,
cool.
and sometimes the villain is actually the hero,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And perhaps you don't intend it to come
Yeah.
out that
So
way.
that's where it's literally comes out that way. Yeah.
They're kind of layered that way. So, how do I know, Nina? As a writer, and particularly I fall into this trap. Every word I write is a gem.
Of course it is.
And everything. It doesn't matter if it's a 1,000-word dissertation or 1,000 pages, whatever. Everything I put to paper is.
Yep.
you know,
For sure. Well, you're a newspaper editor. It
Yes.
has to be, right? Every word counts.
And every manuscript I've sent out has been published, not. But how do I know? How do I tell myself when I'm reading? Because you have to read it after you've written it. How do I know if it's too slow? It needs to be cut.
Oh. I don't know what you do, Vernon. You'll have to tell me what you do, but I find one of the best ways to get to that place where you're going in revision mode, right? And by the way, everything that you write
Yeah, indeed.
has to be revised.
Yeah.
You have to know this. Nobody has ever written one thing and then just it's gone out and it's been perfect.
Yeah.
Every writer has to admit that a large part of the writing, in fact, is in revising, editing,
Yes.
going over, blah, blah,
Be
blah.
prepared.
Be prepared to do
to
this.
rewrite. Yes.
And a good way of basically getting objective about your writing is what we're talking about, is to just set it aside. And one good way of doing that is to have several projects, by the way, right?
Yes.
So you don't, while you're waiting for that one to
Percolate.
percolate and settle down, you work on something else.
Yeah.
When you go back to it, the idea is that you go back and you're more likely going back as a reader, like fresh as a reader.
Yeah.
Then you can see things.
Yeah.
And usually what you're going to see, if you read, when you're reading as a reader, and you're finding that you're skipping a section, because you're kind of going to yourself, oh yeah, I remember I wrote that, then why are you doing that? It's probably because you're a little bored with it. Well, if you're skipping it, who else is going to skip it?
Not a good thing.
Then you go back and figure out, how can I reduce this? And usually that's the key, is to cut.
Yeah.
And people don't like doing that, right? Like you said, it's that gem. This
Yeah.
is so nice.
Yeah.
This is beautiful.
Yeah.
People have to read this.
Yeah.
Usually it's long expositions, because that's often what beginners do, is they'll just
Ramble.
describe, a car
Yeah.
for 3 pages or something like that.
If you're a soft-hearted person and you're going to send your manuscript out to people, publishers and agents, and maybe even other authors, or just your friend, if you want them to be honest with you, then don't take to heart what people tell you, because if you're serious about this, you have to be prepared to weed through, right? I mean, some people, some criticisms aren't necessarily legitimate, but you have to be able to decide what's an honest piece of feedback here that I can incorporate to make my work better.
And the whole idea, you just said it, the whole idea is to make your work better.
Yeah.
And most editors are going to help you do that. Really, if you think about it, if you take away those little personal
exactly.
and just accept that and know that it's a better product, and then it's a win-win situation. Really,
if you can't handle that whole, getting pages back with red marks, sometimes entire sections cut from your manuscript because you've said it too many times, or you've taken a page to say something that a character could say in a sentence. Then
and you'll know this, right? If you've set it aside and you go back as a reader, and you're not totally in that story and excited about it, well, then you do need to cut it. You do need to make it flow more quickly, and that's the whole idea. It needs to flow quickly.
Yeah.
So cutting is a big one, and often we get redundant, and this is again an insecurity of the author.
Yeah.
They'll literally write something twice in 2 different ways.
Yes. I'm guilty of that.
To make sure, we're all guilty of it.
Yeah.
To make sure that the reader got it.
Yeah.
Well, you got to, choose.
Trust in the reader.
Trust the reader. That's a big one. Trust the reader. Less is more. Good Mennonite adage.
And the thing is, you have to keep in mind is that the length is important, but not necessarily the longer books are the best, but the more concise,
tightly woven.
Yeah, exactly. Those are the best books.
Yeah, that does take practice to do that.
It does.
Yeah.
A lot of practice.
Yeah, what was it Blaise Pascal was saying? If I had more time, I would have made it shorter. And that's really what it is.
Yeah.
You do need to take the time to distill it down.
Yeah. So I've done all this, Nina. I've got this great masterpiece, and it's going to be published, and they're going to make a movie from it, right?
Big one. Of course they are.
How will I know?
Be in it?
Absolutely. How will I know that I'm ready to say, okay, this publisher's going to read this, and they're going to want to publish it? No revisions. That's kind of the stretch.
In other words, when to stop.
When to stop.
And when to get going.
When do I know it's time to send this out to the potential publishers?
Wow. I was going to say when you like it. But that's not good enough, because you'll just keep going, and I know people who do this.
Yes.
They just mull over this manuscript for years and years and years, and they're never going to like it.
Yeah.
So you have to do a cutoff point. You have to say, okay, I'm going for it, because really what they're doing is they're using it as an excuse, right? Because they're scared. They're scared of rejection. They're scared of ridicule. Blah 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 blah. All that stuff. They've just spent all this time doing it, and now they've got to. It's like bringing up a kid, right?
Raising a child.
And
absolutely.
Finally, they have to go. They have to leave the house.
Yeah. Set them free.
What you do is you set up some criteria for yourself, and then you stick with it. And one good one is go to your book and try and write a blurb about it. In other words, what is it about?
Mm-hmm.
What is this story about? Essentially we're talking a theme here, right? Why did you write it? What are you getting across? If you can do that, it's ready to go.
A synopsis, kind of, basically.
Exactly, a very short synopsis, a so what thing. What is this story about in a short paragraph? If you're able to do that and feel good about what you've written, send it out.
what you're suggesting is if you can write the blurb that's going to be on the back of your book,
Yeah.
the dust jacket,
Yeah.
then it could be ready,
Yeah.
right?
Then it is complete.
Yeah.
It could need some work, fine.
Sure.
But you have no excuse. You've got a story
Mm-hmm.
because you were able to write that blurb, and that's key because in many cases you can't write the blurb.
Yeah.
Then it needs some work.
Need some work.
There you go.
I send it out and I wait for 6 months and
Or
I
2
don't
years.
hear anything. I finally get it back and the publisher says, thanks, but nah, it's not quite right for us.
Then you burn the book, right?
No. Well, you could, or you could do
no.
what? What could I do?
Oh,
Because I really
gosh.
believe in this story. I keep telling myself somebody will recognize this book as a potential bestseller, and they will want to publish it.
Yep.
What do I do
Well-
after getting a rejection?
You send it out again, period.
Do I go back and rewrite it and tear it apart?
Ooh. You know what? I'd say no.
Mhm.
At some point, you have to be confident that you're going to get
Right.
it out. And you can spend years rewriting. And what you run the risk of doing there is changing the book.
Mhm.
Not necessarily for the better, just
Right.
changing it.
Right.
That's not necessarily good.
Right.
And you're wasting your time. You should be
Right.
writing your next book.
Yes.
That's, in terms of efficient time spent, when you get it, send it off, start your next book.
Right.
That's key. Start your next project, which might get published before that other one,
Yeah,
which
fine.
actually happened to me.
Yeah.
I ended up, this one here, Darwin's Paradox, is actually the sequel to the first book that I wrote, which is ironically going to get published this year. And this has been out for several years now.
There you go.
So I tried to get that book out. It didn't work. Meantime, I wrote this one, and it got published.
There you go.
And because it got published, the same publisher picked up
The other one.
the first one as a prequel.
There you go.
And there you go. So the lesson is just keep going, keep writing.
Yes.
Don't spend time revising. Once you've decided to send something off, stay with that. Be confident, keep the faith, stay with it. You've made that decision that it's good, and it probably is.
How do I convince a publisher that he or she is going to read this? Because they get swamped with these things every day. I'm sure they get dozens of submissions. How do I make my submission stand out?
Well, there's many different thoughts on that from professional authors. Usually you have to go with their guidelines that they ask for,
Yes.
which is anything from a query letter, synopsis, chapter samples, sample chapters. And if you're going to be doing that, then you have to spend time on those products, like writing a kick-ass query letter,
Right.
which has this very tantalizing and teasing idea that makes them want to read more. That's the whole point. You want
Yes.
them to read something, and then hopefully that will twig them in them. That's how I got most of my stuff published. I wrote a query letter, got them interested in the idea. They asked for a partial. They read the partial. They loved it. They wanted to read the rest. They published it.
Right.
That's how it often works. So it's that getting that first step in the door.
Mhm.
Remember, did we talk about conferences? If you go
Yes,
to
we
a
did.
conference and you talk to an editor or an agent, sometimes you can just give them a pitch. It's the same idea as writing a book blurb. That's why it's important to write that blurb for yourself,
Right.
as well as using it for others. If you can't tell someone else what your book is about, you're in trouble,
Yeah.
right? Then you
Because
don't
you're-
know what that book's about.
You're the best salesperson.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
So that often will get you in. And next thing you know, if they're interested in the kernel of an idea, then 10 to 1, they might want the book. So
Is
that's
it
usually
a good idea to, if you get rejected, to write back to the publisher and say,
and
what
say, you.
what do you mean this is not
This
good
is the
enough
best
for
thing
us?
since
You're
J.K.
missing it.
Rowling.
Yeah, exactly. Is that
Well,
something you recommend
no.
people do?
Sorry, I missed what you said. I was
Is
too
it-
busy ranting.
That's okay. Is it something that people should do?
What, respond to a rejection?
Yeah, write back to the publisher and say, what do you mean? Like, explain yourself.
Only if they've said something that you need clarification on. Otherwise, accept that and go on.
find someone else.
Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting. So then,
and the reason I
okay,
say that is they don't have time.
Right.
They really don't have time for. They have time for things that interest them.
mhm,
If they've made a comment that suggests a possible interest, then that's fine.
Right.
Otherwise, you respectfully move
just
them along.
once you've done your revisions and reworked it a bit, you know, perhaps the publisher has said, well, not suitable for us for whatever reason, and you think, oh, I could fix this up, then perhaps it will. Can you, or do you recommend that you resubmit it after you've done some work on it?
Again, depending on what they've said,
Right.
definitely,
Right.
definitely. You do magazine articles and stuff too?
Not so much.
Okay, because I was going to say in magazines that's definitely often the case.
Right.
Like they'll make a little suggestion, and then you can ship it back really quickly.
Right.
And definitely go for that.
Right.
Because what you're doing is you're setting up a rapport with these people.
Right.
And I mean, they want to see stuff. So, boy, I have a chapter on rejection in the book that, there it is. The Fiction Writer Get Published Right Now. And
Good book. You should.
yeah. It's got pictures in it.
Yeah. That's
Little
lots of good tips.
Little
though.
aliens.
Lots of
No,
good-
that's him. But there's a chapter on rejection, chapter R,
Yeah.
and it actually I include many rejection letters that I've had, and I talk about what they mean.
Right.
And it is a science, but the key is always to understand that it's a two-way process. It's a correspondence of essentially getting published, and these guys, that's their business,
Yeah,
right? Is to
yeah,
publish.
yeah.
So they're not going to just say buzz off. They're especially if you show promise, and they will let you know that too. It's important to always look at it as a way in as opposed to as a way out, and so taking those little hints and stuff
Right.
is important.
Beyond the technical aspect of writing and getting a rejection letter, because we all receive them, and some more frequently than others.
And that's good. You know, if you're saying to me, I receive a lot of rejection
Mhm.
letters, that means you're doing the right thing. What it means,
When the right
what?
thing being
What?
getting
No,
published.
it means that you're prolific. And I
Yes,
remember
well.
reading that. In fact, in a Writer's Digest article, the fellow was saying that. He said, if you're not getting a lot of rejections, you're not doing stuff.
Oh, I'm doing
You
stuff
need
right.
You need to be out there getting lots.
Yeah.
And this is a published author, right?
Yeah.
If you're getting a lot of rejections, it means you're putting out, and that's key, because it's a numbers game. For every 3 rejections, you get an acceptance, right? But you need to get those 3, so they add up, right?
Yeah. But part of that process, Nina, is from the technical aspect aside, and you say there's a science to it, but what do you say to authors from the emotional aspect of being? Nobody wants to be rejected.
You're right.
It's human nature
Yeah.
to take yourself out of a situation where you're going to be rejected. So if you're an author or a would-be author and you're constantly rejected by publishers, isn't it more human nature to pull back and say, I'm not going to do that to myself anymore? How do you...
Yeah, it is. It is.
So
definitely.
how do you, as a teacher and
Right.
as a writer, how do you encourage people? What do you say to people to...
Okay, I say scream as much as you can when you get that sucker, and be mad and go have a drink, and then read it again, and then look at it as a business person. Now, that's just, me saying, telling you how to think. I do have a system which helps you. Really what you're talking about is, well, actually what I'm saying is, don't take your emotions out. Don't deny that. It is true. It hurts.
Yes.
It is a personal thing. It's important. It's your writing after all. It is. People say, oh, it's not you who was rejected. It was your writing. And you kind of go,
Oh,
well, wait a
isn't that
minute.
me?
Isn't that me?
Yeah,
it is
exactly.
you.
Yeah,
It is
yeah,
you.
that is
And
me.
yes, so do feel the pain.
Yes.
And get mad. I do.
Yes.
Every single time. But at some point you have to go and do something about it,
Mm-hmm.
and get on with life. One good way of objectifying yourself, because that's what you're wanting to do, is, and it goes back to that point of getting a lot of rejections, means you're prolific. If you're prolific, that means you have a lot of things out there. You've written a lot of stuff. If you've got a bunch of things out there queued up, you get one rejection. Well, you have all these other ones out there waiting, so it doesn't hurt as much.
It doesn't.
Right? So that really does work. That really works.
So just keep working.
Just keep working.
Speaking
It's again that, remember
Yeah.
that novel that you sent out and you're waiting 6 months?
Yeah. And I have waited for 6 months.
If you've got another one in the works and you could get that one out, then again it's not so bad. It's
Right.
not so bad waiting. And that is the trick.
I have personally been rejected many times for this one particular project, right? But I've moved on to other projects, and then because I believe in that story, and I keep
Yeah.
telling myself someday that will happen, and I
And
do
it
go
will.
back, and I think it comes down to a personal commitment to that story, and that I believe in that story, and I just haven't found that right publisher or that right person that will share that
Yeah.
belief.
Yeah.
And I really believe that if you have a passion for that story, come back to the word, to one of your
Exactly.
P's. It's the passion.
Yeah, it is
To
definitely.
want to get the story out.
And part of what's helping you to do that is that you have these other things
Yes.
going on,
Yes.
and that you're successful in them, and that gives you the allows you to keep the confidence
Yeah.
you've already had, and the passion for the project.
Right.
And
So you
it'll-
can
it'll-
move
you'll
on
realize it.
and then come back when you have time. I have
Precisely.
actually
Yeah.
taken that manuscript after being rejected and put it away for months.
I was just going to say that happens too. You
Yeah.
just put something away,
Yeah.
and that's probably a good thing to do. And if it still niggles at you,
does.
you know it's important, and
Yeah.
you know you're going to do something about it, and it'll get out eventually.
Yeah.
That's what happened to that first book, the one that didn't get published
Yes.
first.
Yes.
It got set aside.
Yeah.
Well, it came out again, right?
Yeah.
It's like those ghosts of yours.
Ghosts in my
Ghosts
closet.
in your, yeah, they'll keep niggling. If it's important, it'll come out.
Yeah. No, Nina, we talk about the creative process, but I think authors and would-be authors have to realize that when publishers are looking at potential manuscripts to take on, it is a business for them, isn't it? I mean, they're looking for that great masterpiece, obviously, but they're also looking at things that they can
Oh, for sure.
sell.
For sure. And I mean that's where the bigger publisher sometimes doesn't pick up on the best stuff.
Right.
Like I guess J.K. Rowling is one of the best examples of that.
Right.
That was a risky scenario, so she didn't get picked up by a big publisher, but a smaller publisher was more eclectic, more willing to take the risks based on different criteria.
Mhm.
Saw a potential in that and picked up her work, right?
And look at it now.
And look what happens.
Yeah, exactly.
And what happens is something like that takes off, and then a bigger publisher will come in later, like almost like a vulture. Oh, well, we'll take care of that
Yeah,
for you now.
yeah.
We'll buy you out.
Yeah, now that
And then-
you're worth
yeah,
millions.
now,
yeah, interesting.
So that there is a process in that, and it's funny that the bigger publishing companies, the irony is that they got that way because they took the risks in the beginning.
Yes,
And now
exactly.
they're so big, they can't afford to take the risks anymore.
And let's just talk about that because I know myself, as an author included, when I think of a book that I want published, a manuscript that I've written, I automatically think of the bigger picture. Is it a good idea to just limit yourself to looking at New York, Toronto, London, or wherever because you think you have this great story? Or should you look smaller, regional?
Well, my personal opinion is the small regional publishers are great.
Okay.
They're great. They, like I said, they're still able to have the vision, and they publish all kinds of weird, wonderful things.
Right.
There's nothing
Right.
wrong being in that company,
Right.
and they're the next wave. Just like I said, every big publishing company started small.
Mhm.
They all started small,
Mhm.
and the reason they got big was because they had that neat vision and they went with it. So if a publisher picks you up, doesn't matter what the size they are, if they pick you up, they picked you up.
Mhm.
They picked you up, and you're worthwhile, So the corollary to that is that they're going to do okay.
Right.
And this book, well, both of these are smaller publishing companies, but they're great ones. This is Starfire World Syndicate, and this is Dragon Moon Press. This is in the States, and this is in Canada. And smaller companies, but doing really well. They've got awesome titles. As you can see, the artwork is gorgeous. The production is awesome. There's advantages to going with a smaller company in that you have more control. I had total say in the cover. I worked, more one-on-one with everybody.
Mm-hmm.
The marketing and the promotion is the same, like we mentioned before. Even if you're with a big company, people think, oh, then they'll take care of everything. No, you still have to go out and do everything,
Right.
whether it's a small company or a big company.
Yeah.
So the difference, there's a difference in terms of artistic license, which is cool. Okay, the corollary of that is, they don't publish millions of copies, and the distribution might not be quite the same, but it also can be.
Right.
So the smaller companies are doing quite well.
So don't limit yourself.
Don't limit yourself.
Right.
Exactly.
What about self-publishing, Nina? Is that something you recommend, or because I hear a lot of people talking about that?
It's self-publishing is really taking off. One of the reasons is because of the technology that's available for POD publishing, POD printing, and that sort of thing. And again, coming up, the technology is available to create really gorgeous books at a decent price that people can afford. The advantage and disadvantage, I'll just tell you one of each. Self-publishing, when you sell a book that you've self-published, of course you get everything. Of course you put out costs too, right?
Right.
But you still get more. You get more than you would through a traditional publisher, because they pick up all the stuff, right? And you're left with a little bit left, right? little really tiny bit. Yeah. The corollary to that, of course, is the distribution. They have everything, and they're going to sell probably more than you as an individual, unless you have some kind of kick-ass marketing campaign, which you could. Again, we could talk ad nauseum about doing online stuff that people can do.
And we don't have time because I think we're running out of time.
Oh
so,
dear.
Yes.
So there you go. So
but
there are advantages and disadvantages
for
to
sure.
both.
And I just want to say, in case we do run out of time, Nina, before I get this in there, that if we've covered a lot of bases here today, but if you're a budding author or you just have general questions about the profession, then you can reach Nina, and you can reach her at The Passionate Writer.
Right.
And the website is www.thepassionatewriter.com/Writer's Digest, right? And then just sign in and ask your questions.
Yeah, right on. And again, I do coaching. I do online coaching as well as one-on-one, wherever, whenever. Just go to my website, ninamunteanu.com, and you'll see all the possibilities there. I do anything from manuscript readings to storyboarding and looking at specific problems, going over writer's block, that kind of stuff.
Right.
And I enjoy doing that, and I'll see you there.
Right on. Well, Nina, we've pretty much hit that brick wall of time.
Yeah. Thanks for the convo.
Oh,
that was
awesome.
Great.
Some wonderful topics
and
some great information there. And you should, if we haven't covered a topic that you're interested in, you should contact Nina. She's a wealth of information
or Vernon.
Or me, yes. But I would just send you on to Nina because she's the expert.
Okay. Well, you publish a lot too, so.
Well, thank you very much for your time, and for all you budding authors out there, just the key is to keep writing and be passionate about what you're doing, and don't take rejection to heart. Just get out there and do it.
Keep going.
Keep going.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
Take care.
Are you a writer looking to get published? Then visit thepassionatewriter.com and purchase The Fiction Writer. Get published right now. It's a guide that provides the basic tools that every beginning writer needs to get published. It's packed with real examples and practical exercises. This is your shortcut to getting published. Author Nina Munteanu is lively and humorous and makes learning fun. Give your book the chance it deserves to get published. Visit thepassionatewriter.com now to learn more.